Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan. I am a writer and a storyteller. I hope you enjoy the journey I've written for you today. So get cozy and relax. Rain battered the windshield of Unit 4 like a handful of gravel thrown by an angry god, blurring the neon lights of the city into bleeding watercolors. It was 3 a.m., and my partner was asleep in the passenger seat, head lolling against the cold glass, leaving me alone with the static of the radio and the smell of wet asphalt. Being a paramedic in this city does not mean you are a hero. It means you are a janitor for the mess people make of their lives. We got the call for a John Doe in an alleyway off 42nd Street. Just a possible overdose or cardiac arrest. Standard routine for a Tuesday night. Pulling the rig up to the curb, I grabbed the bag and stepped out into the downpour, boots splashing in puddles that looked like oil, feeling the water soak through my uniform instantly. The body was tucked behind a dumpster, a man in a suit that cost more than my car, looking completely out of place among the trash bags and discarded needles. Kneeling beside him, I checked for a pulse, but his skin was already cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your own fingers and stays there. He was gone, eyes staring up at the brick wall, empty and glassy. Checking his pockets for ID is protocol, looking for a wallet or a phone to tell us who he was so we could tell someone he was gone. Reaching into the inside pocket of his jacket, my fingers brushed against plastic, pulling out a small, amber pill bottle with no label, just a piece of masking tape with a handwritten symbol that looked like a bird rising from ash. Inside there was one single pill, red like fresh blood, sitting at the bottom of the container. My head was pounding, a migraine that had been drilling into my skull since the start of the shift, pulsing behind my eyes like a strobe light. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was just a stupid reflex, but I mistook the bottle for my own aspirin, which I usually keep in the same pocket. Tipping the bottle back, the red pill slid onto my tongue, and I swallowed it dry before I even realized the mistake. It tasted like copper and electricity, burning the back of my throat, making me gag for a second before it dissolved into a warm heat in my stomach. Realizing what I had done, panic flared in my chest, a sudden spike of adrenaline. I just took an unknown pill from a dead man's pocket. The world tilted sideways. Standing up, my knees buckled, hitting the wet pavement hard enough to tear the fabric of my pants. My partner was shouting something from the ambulance, but the sound was underwater, muffled and distant. My heart hammered against my ribs, faster and faster. A drum solo played by a madman. 100 beats per minute, then 150, then 200. It felt like my veins were filled with boiling water, rushing through every limb, setting my nerves on fire. I collapsed onto my back, staring up at the rain falling from the black sky. But the drops didn't feel cold anymore. They felt like steam. Vision tunneling, black edges creeping in. I thought this was it. I thought I was dying right there next to the corpse in the alley. Thump, thump, thump. Then silence. Darkness took over, absolute and heavy. My eyes snapped open. I was still in the alley, but the rain had stopped, or maybe I just couldn't feel it. Sitting up, I expected to feel the groggy hangover of a near-death experience, but instead I felt awake. More awake than I had been in 10 years. Looking at my hands, the scrape from the fall was gone, the skin smooth and unbroken, not even a scar left behind. My migraine had vanished, replaced by a clarity that was almost frightening, sharp and high definition. Standing up, I felt light, my muscles humming with energy. What was in that thing? The dead man was still there, lifeless and gray, but I felt like I had just drunk a gallon of pure oxygen. Walking back to the ambulance, my partner was staring at me, face pale, asking if I was okay, saying I had been out for 5 minutes. "I'm fine," I said, and for the first time in my life, I actually meant it. But I didn't know then that the man in the alley hadn't died of an overdose. He had died because someone was hunting him, and now whatever was inside him was inside me. The shift continued, but everything felt wrong, or maybe too right. Sounds were louder. The siren wailing was a physical punch to the eardrum. The lights of the city were blindingly bright. We got a call for a car accident on Interstate 90, a bad one, a pileup involving a semi-truck. Arriving on the scene, it was chaos. Metal twisted into shapes metal shouldn't take, fire licking at the asphalt. Running toward the wreck, a piece of debris, a jagged shard of steel from the truck's cargo, flew through the air. It hit me. It hit me right in the chest. I looked down, expecting to see blood, expecting to fall. The metal had pierced my uniform, tearing the shirt, burying itself an inch into my pectoral muscle. There was pain, sharp and white-hot, but then a tickle. I watched, frozen in place, as the metal was pushed out, slowly, rejected by my own body. It fell to the ground with a clang. The wound underneath knitted itself together, flesh weaving into flesh, skin closing up like a zipper being pulled shut. In 3 seconds, there was nothing left but a hole in my shirt and a smudge of blood that wasn't mine. I am not human anymore. Paranoia is a funny thing. It starts small, like a scratch in the back of your mind, and then it takes over completely. Driving home after the shift, every pair of headlights in the rear-view mirror looked like they were following me, keeping pace perfectly with my turns. Arriving at my apartment building at 6 a.m., the hallway was too quiet. The kind of silence that screams something is wrong. Reaching for my keys, the door to apartment 4B pushed open with a soft creak. It was already unlocked. Stepping inside, the smell hit me first. Not the smell of a break-in, but the smell of bleach and antiseptic, sterile and cold. Sitting on my couch were 3 men in gray tactical gear, faces covered by black masks, looking like statues waiting for a command. One of them stood up, holding a scanner in his hand, pointing it at me like a weapon. The machine chirped loud in the silence. "Target positive," he said, his voice flat and bored. "The compound is in his bloodstream. Secure him for transport." Turning to run, my boots slipped on the hardwood floor, scrambling for traction to get back to the hallway, but they were faster than they looked. A sharp hiss cut through the air, followed by a pinch in my neck, a tranquilizer dart. My legs turned to rubber instantly, the strength draining out of them as I crashed into the doorframe, cheek sliding against the wood. Vision blurring, the world spinning into a gray fog, I heard footsteps approaching, heavy and rhythmic. They didn't hit me. They didn't kick me. "Do not damage the host," the leader said, grabbing my collar and dragging me across the floor like a sack of laundry. "The boss wants him alive. We need the blood flow continuous to synthesize the batch." That was the last thing I heard before the blackness swallowed me whole again. A terrifying realization that they didn't want me dead, they wanted me as a living battery. Waking up was not gentle. It was a bucket of ice water to the soul. I was in a room, or rather a cell, made of thick glass and reinforced steel, suspended over a dark pit. The lights buzzed overhead, humming like angry hornets, too bright for my eyes. Looking down at my arms, heavy industrial tubes were inserted into both veins, pumping my blood out into clear canisters that were already filling up with bright red liquid. "Subject awake," a voice boomed from a speaker, echoing off the glass walls. "Initiating regeneration stress test, level 1. The floor beneath me shifted, metal plates sliding open to reveal a bed of spinning blades below. Before I could even scream, the floor dropped. Falling, the blades tore into skin and bone, a white-hot agony that should have been the end. Darkness came for a second, then snap. My eyes opened. I was back on the metal floor of the cell, my body whole, the blood in the canisters still pumping. I had died, and they had just waited for me to put myself back together so they could do it again. Fear is a chemical, just like adrenaline, and eventually the tank runs dry. Laying on the cold metal floor for the 10th time, watching my own blood flow back into the open wounds on my chest, something snapped inside my head. But it wasn't my sanity. It was my inhibition. They had killed me 6 times in the last hour, or what felt like an hour, and every time I woke up, the pain was less terrifying and more annoying. If I cannot die, then I have nothing to lose. Standing up, the tubes in my arms pulled tight, the plastic digging into my skin. Grabbing the thick line pumping my blood to their machines, I didn't try to untie it. I ripped it out, a spray of red coating the glass wall, followed by the other one. The alarm screamed instantly, a high-pitched wail that vibrated in my teeth. The glass door hissed open, and 3 guards rushed in, batons raised, expecting a weak, drained victim. They found a monster instead. The first guard swung for my head, a blow meant to knock me out. I didn't dodge. The baton connected with my skull, a flash of white light blinding me for a second, but I didn't fall. My hand shot out, grabbing his throat, squeezing with a strength that shouldn't belong to a paramedic. I threw him, literally threw him, into the glass wall, hard enough to spiderweb the reinforced pane. The other 2 panic-fired, the deafening boom of 9mm rounds echoing in the small space. One bullet hit my shoulder, spinning me around. The other punched through my stomach. It hurt. It burned like a hot poker, but my legs didn't stop moving. Walking through the gunfire felt like walking through a swarm of bees, annoying and painful, but not fatal. I tackled the second man, driving him into the ground, feeling the bones in my own hand shatter as I punched his helmet, then feeling them knit back together a second later to punch again. I was a biological tank, a weapon made of flesh that refused to stay broken. Leaving the cell, I found myself in a long concrete corridor, alarms flashing red on every wall. More footsteps were coming, heavy boots on metal stairs. There was no way out through the main blast doors. They were sealed tight. To my right, a large observation window looked out over the city skyline. We were high up, maybe the 30th floor of some corporate fortress. Looking at the drop, a normal man sees death. I saw an exit. Running full speed, ignoring the shouting voices behind me, I threw my body at the glass. The impact knocked the wind out of me as the window gave way, showering the night air with diamonds. Falling, the wind roared in my ears, the city lights spinning in a blur of gold and white. Gravity took over, pulling me down, down, down. I hit the roof of a parked car below with the force of a bomb. Metal crunching, glass exploding, my body breaking in 100 places at once. Darkness hit me again. But then, I opened my eyes, pushed the crumpled car door open, and climbed out of the wreck, ready to finish this. Climbing out of the crushed metal of the sedan, my body felt like a bag of broken glass that was slowly putting itself back together. Passers-by were screaming, phones out, filming the man who just fell from the sky and walked away. I couldn't stay here, not with the sirens wailing in the distance, getting louder with every heartbeat. Stumbling into the shadows of an alley, my left leg snapped back into alignment with a sickening pop, forcing a sharp intake of breath through gritted teeth. The cold night air bit at my skin, the hospital gown, or what was left of it, hanging in tatters around my waist. I was exposed, bleeding from a dozen wounds that were already closing, and standing in the middle of a city that wanted to eat me alive. I needed clothes, I needed a weapon, and I needed to get off the grid before the men in the gray tactical gear came down to finish what they started. Moving through the back streets, the city felt different now. It felt like a hunting ground. Every shadow looked like a gunman. Every car engine sounded like a pursuit vehicle. Breaking a window of a closed thrift store on Fifth Avenue, the alarm didn't trigger, just the sound of glass crunching under bare feet. Pulling on a heavy coat and a pair of work boots, the warmth was a shock to the system, grounding me back in reality. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a ghost. Checking my reflection in a cracked mirror, the blood from the fall was already flaking off, revealing fresh, pink skin underneath. They think I am running away, but they are wrong. I am just getting ready. But first, I had to survive the night. Stepping back onto the street, a black SUV rolled slowly past the alley entrance, tinted windows reflecting the orange streetlights. They were already here. Ducking behind a dumpster, I watched as the rear window rolled down, a suppressor silencer poking out like a black finger. They were scanning the crowd, looking for the anomaly, looking for the man who wouldn't die. If I ran, they would chase. If I fought, they would call for backup. I needed to disappear. Spotting a subway entrance across the street, the stairs leading down into the dark belly of the city, I made my move. Sprinting across the tarmac, the suppressor spit 2 shots, twip, twip, chipping the brick right by my ear. I didn't flinch. I just jumped the turnstile and vanished into the tunnels, leaving the world above behind. The subway tunnels were a different world, a kingdom of rust and shadows where the sun never touched the ground. Walking deeper into the dark, the air grew thick with the smell of old grease and ozone, a metallic taste that sat heavy on the tongue. Ignoring the warning signs that said, "Danger, high voltage," I stuck to the maintenance path, keeping my head low as the rumble of the city above faded into a dull thrum. My body was still knitting itself together, muscles twitching as fibers reconnected, a strange sensation like worms moving under the skin. The hunger hit me then, not a normal appetite, but a starving, hollow ache in my gut. Regenerating an entire skeletal system apparently burns a lot of calories. Leaning against the damp concrete wall, I realized that being immortal didn't mean I was invincible. It just meant I was a very expensive machine that needed fuel. And right now, I was running on empty. The rails began to hum, a vibration that started in the soles of my boots and traveled up my spine. A train was coming, pushing a wall of stale air ahead of it. Looking back, I saw them. 3 beams of light cutting through the blackness, sweeping the tracks systematically. They weren't running, they were hunting, moving with the patience of men who know their prey has nowhere to go. "Subject is in the tunnel," a voice echoed, distorted by the distance. "Switch to thermal." They could see my heat. Hiding in the dark was useless if I lit up like a Christmas tree on their scopes. I had seconds to make a choice. Fight 3 armed men in a narrow tunnel while starving and unarmed, or take a chance on the steel beast roaring toward me at 40 miles per hour. The headlights of the train blinded me for a second, a twin sun underground. Stepping onto the tracks, I didn't try to stop it. I tried to time it. As the first car rushed past, a blur of silver and graffiti, I lunged. My fingers scrambled for purchase on the maintenance ladder on the side of the rear car, metal tearing at my fingernails. The force yanked my arm almost out of its socket. A sharp pop, followed by the instant, burning relief of the joints snapping back into place. Clinging to the side of the rattling train, the wind whipping my stolen coat around me, I watched the 3 flashlights fade into the distance. I was alive. I was moving. And for the first time since I swallowed that red pill, I was the one deciding where we were going. Next stop, the end of the line. The train screeched to a halt in the rail yard, a wind graveyard of rusted metal and shipping containers under the pale moonlight. Dropping from the side of the car, my boots hit the gravel with a heavy crunch, knees bending to absorb the shock. My joints popped, a dry sound like snapping twigs, before resealing into perfect alignment. The ride had been brutal, holding on to cold steel for 40 minutes at 60 miles per hour, wind stripping the warmth right out of my bones. Stumbling toward the perimeter fence, the hunger came back, stronger this time, a clawing emptiness in my stomach that made my hands shake. It felt less like hunger and more like starvation, my body demanding raw materials to replace the blood and tissue I had left behind in that cell. Climbing the chain-link fence, the metal dug into my palms, slicing the skin, but the cuts closed up before I even reached the top. I was a self-repairing engine, but even engines need gas. A truck-stop diner sat on the edge of the highway, its neon sign buzzing with a dying flicker. Pushing through the glass doors, the smell of grease and coffee hit me like a physical blow, making my mouth water instantly. Sitting at a booth in the back, I ordered everything: eggs, steak, pancakes, 3 burgers. When the food came, I didn't eat, I devoured. Forking meat into my mouth, I could feel the energy flooding back into my system, the trembling in my hands stopping as the calories were converted into new cells. The waitress looked at me with a mix of pity and disgust, seeing a man in a dirty coat eating like a wolf that hadn't seen food in a week. "You okay, honey?" she asked, pouring more coffee. I just nodded, throat too full to speak, keeping my head down. Then I looked up at the television mounted in the corner. The fork froze halfway to my mouth. On the screen, a breaking news banner flashed red. "Manhunt underway for armed fugitive." My face was there. It was a photo from my paramedic ID, looking calm and normal, next to a blurry security camera shot of me throwing the guard into the glass wall. The voiceover wasn't talking about a victim of kidnapping. It was talking about a dangerous psychotic who had stolen narcotics and assaulted officers. "Suspect is considered extremely dangerous and likely under the influence of experimental drugs," the reporter said. The syndicate didn't just have hitmen. They had the media. They had the police. They had the whole narrative. I wasn't a survivor escaping a torture chamber. I was a monster on the loose. Everyone in the diner turned to look at the screen. Then slowly, heads started to turn toward me. It was time to go. The air in the diner turned to ice, the kind of heavy silence that comes right before a storm breaks. Pushing the plate away, the ceramic scraped loud against the formica table, a sound like a gunshot in the sudden quiet. The waitress was already behind the counter, her hand shaking violently as she punched 3 digits into the landline. 911. There was no point in explaining, no point in raising my hands and telling them that the news was lying, that the corporation hunting me owned the station broadcasting my face. To them, I wasn't a victim. I was the monster on the screen. Standing up, I dropped a crumpled $20 bill on the table, stolen from the thrift store coat pocket, and walked toward the door. "Don't you move!" a trucker shouted from the corner booth, holding a serrated steak knife like it was a sword, his knuckles white. Ignoring him, I didn't run. I just walked. I pushed through the glass doors back into the night, leaving the warmth and the judgment behind. But the parking lot wasn't empty anymore. It was awash in blinding red and blue light. They were fast, too fast. A cruiser blocked the exit, high beams cutting through the darkness like searchlights. A state trooper stood behind the open door, weapon drawn and leveled at my chest, shielding his body behind the metal. "Hands where I can see them! Get down on the ground, now!" he screamed, his voice cracking with adrenaline. He was terrified. A terrified man with a gun is infinitely more dangerous than a professional killer, because he is unpredictable. Raising my hands slowly, I took a step forward into the light. "I didn't do it," I shouted over the engine noise, trying to keep my voice steady. "You have to listen to me. I am injured." He didn't listen. The crack of the .45 caliber pistol tore through the air, deafening at this range. The impact hit my right thigh like a sledgehammer, spinning me around and throwing me onto the gravel. Collapsing onto the cold stones, the burning sensation flared, hot and white, a lance of fire shooting up my leg. But then came the itch. It wasn't just a signal. It was a mechanical process. I could feel the individual fibers of the quadriceps muscles snapping back together, the nerves reconnecting with a spark of phantom electricity that made my leg twitch violently. Looking down, the hole in my jeans was smoking, but the skin underneath was already closing, pushing the flattened lead bullet out onto the pavement with a soft clink. The trooper saw it too. He lowered the gun slightly, eyes wide, face draining of all color in the harsh headlights. "Holy Mary," he whispered, watching a miracle he wasn't meant to see. This was my chance. The shock had bought me 3 seconds. Scrambling to my feet, I didn't attack him. I'm a paramedic. I save lives. I don't take them. Instead, I ran. Sprinting toward the tree line behind the diner, leaves whipping my face, I heard him fire again. Pop, pop, pop. One bullet clipped my ear, stinging like a bee sting. Another buried itself in my back, right between the shoulder blades. It hurt. God, it hurt, knocking the wind out of me. But it didn't stop me. The lung tissue healed around the injury in seconds, sealing the air leak before I could even cough up blood. I kept running, plunging into the deep woods, leaving a trail of blood that would vanish before the dogs could even smell it. Branches whipped against my face, drawing thin lines of red that erased themselves as quickly as they appeared. I was a ghost moving through the underbrush, a creature that could not be broken. The sounds of the siren faded behind me, swallowed by the vast, indifferent silence of the forest. Leaning against a massive oak tree, breathing hard, I realized running wasn't going to work anymore. As long as I was the prey, they would never stop. I had to become the predator. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the only thing I had left, a lighter. Flicking it on, the small flame danced in the dark. They wanted my blood? Fine. I would bring it to them. But I wasn't going to knock on the front door. I was going to burn their house down. The woods were silent, but it was a deception. Lying flat against the damp earth, covered in decaying leaves and mud, I slowed my breathing until it was barely a whisper. The lighter was gone, extinguished, because I didn't need fire to find them. I needed them to find me. A drone buzzed overhead, a black hornet against the stars, scanning for heat signatures. They hadn't sent the police into the deep woods. They sent the professionals, the same gray-clad men who had drained my blood in the tower. 3 of them moved in a wedge formation, boots silent on the moss, night vision goggles glowing soft green. They thought they were tracking a wounded animal, a scared paramedic running on luck. They didn't understand that the man they were hunting couldn't be stopped by anything they carried in those rifles. Watching the point man step over a fallen log, I felt a strange calm settle over me, a cold detachment. My body wasn't just healing injuries anymore. It was adapting, sharpening, becoming something predatory. Dropping from the branch above, I hit the rear guard with the weight of a falling anvil. His collarbone snapped under my boots, a wet, sickening sound that echoed in the clearing. The other two spun around, rifles raised, muzzle flashes lighting up the dark like strobe lights. Bullets tore into my chest, punching through the stolen coat, shredding skin and muscle. The impact threw me back against the tree bark, breathless and bloody. It hurt. It always hurts. Searing heat ripping through my nerves, but the fear was gone. Pushing off the tree, I didn't fall. I charged. The wounds on my chest were already closing, steam rising from the knitting flesh in the cold air. The guard on the left froze, his eyes visible through the goggles, wide with absolute terror. He had just put 2 rounds into my heart, and I was still sprinting at him. Tackling him to the ground, the rifle flew from his hands, and I delivered a single, calculated punch to his helmet, shattering the visor and knocking him cold instantly. The last man, the leader, scrambled backward, tripping over roots, firing wildly into the air. He wasn't shooting to kill anymore. He was shooting out of panic. His clip ran dry. Silence rushed back into the forest, heavy and oppressive. Walking toward him, I didn't hurry. I stepped over the groaning man on the ground and grabbed the leader by his tactical vest, hoisting him up until his feet dangled off the mud. "Where is it?" I asked, voice rough, gravelly. "Where is the lab?" He stammered, shaking, trying to pull a knife from his belt. I grabbed his wrist, squeezing until the bones creaked, not breaking them, just warning him. He dropped the knife. "Industrial district," he gasped, spitting blood. "Sector 4, the old pharmaceutical plant. Please, man, I'm just a contractor." Just a contractor, just doing a job. I dropped him, letting him crumple into the dirt. "Run," I whispered, "and tell them I'm coming." Stripping the tactical vest off the unconscious guard, I strapped it on over my torn coat. It fit tight, heavy with ceramic plates and ammunition pouches. I took the rifle, checking the chamber, fully loaded. I picked up the leader's radio, listening to the static hiss and the confused voices asking for a status report. I didn't answer. I just clipped it to my shoulder. Checking the GPS tracker on his wrist, a glowing blue dot pulsed a few miles east. Sector 4. I found their vehicle parked on the logging road, a matte black off-road truck. Turning the key, the engine roared to life, a deep, angry growl that matched the fire in my chest. I wasn't running away anymore. I was driving straight into the heart of the beast. Sector 4 was a graveyard of industry, a sprawling maze of rusted smokestacks and broken windows that looked dead to the world. But I knew better. Driving the stolen black truck toward the main gate, the headlights cut through the fog, revealing a high-tech security checkpoint that didn't belong in a derelict shipyard. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight, the leather crunching under the pressure, but my heartbeat was slow, controlled, almost robotic. Wearing the tactical mask and vest I had taken from the woods, I rolled down the window as a guard approached, a red laser scanning the barcode on the side of the vehicle. The gate didn't ask questions. It just groaned open, sliding back on oiled tracks to welcome one of its own. Rolling into the compound, the scale of the operation hit me. This wasn't a gang hideout. It was a fortress. Dozens of armed men patrolled the perimeter, and in the center sat the main facility, a massive concrete bunker humming with enough power to light up a small city. Parking the truck in the shadows of a loading dock, I killed the engine and sat in the silence for a moment, checking the rifle, checking the knife, and checking myself. I wasn't here to arrest anyone. I was here to shut it down. Slipping into the building through a service entrance was disturbingly easy, mostly because they relied on fear to keep people out, not locks. The air inside was recycled and cold, smelling of ozone and that same sterile antiseptic scent from my cell. Moving down the hallways, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering on the white tile floors. I passed a door labeled Synthesis Lab, pushing it open just a crack to peek inside. What I saw made my blood run cold, colder than the death I had already cheated. Rows of glass tanks lined the walls, filled with a translucent red liquid, bubbling and churning. Inside the tanks were things, failed attempts, distorted masses of flesh and bone that looked human once, but had grown wrong, twisted by the same regeneration that was keeping me alive. They weren't just trying to extract the drug. They were trying to mass-produce immortality. And they were breaking a lot of eggs to make that omelet. A scientist in a white coat walked past the tanks, holding a clipboard, looking at the horrors in the jars like they were just data points on a spreadsheet. The rage started in my gut, a burning coal that spread to my fingertips. I stepped into the room, letting the heavy door slam shut behind me. Boom. The sound echoed like a thunderclap in the quiet lab. 3 scientists and 2 guards spun around, eyes going wide as they saw the battered figure standing there, covered in mud and dried blood, wearing their own tactical gear. "Shift change," I said, voice flat and hard. The guards reached for their holsters, but they were moving in slow motion compared to me. I crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing the nearest guard by the vest and throwing him into a rack of test tubes. The crash was deafening, a symphony of destruction as chemicals sprayed across the floor, hissing and smoking where they touched the tile. The second guard fired, bang, bang, hitting me in the stomach, but I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. The bullets felt like bee stings, annoying little pinpricks that my body pushed out a second later. A red light began to flash on the ceiling, rotating and casting long, dancing shadows across the room. "Containment breach," a robotic voice announced calmly. "Level B2. Lockdown initiated." Good. Let them lock the doors. It just meant they were trapped in here with me. I grabbed a heavy metal stool from a workbench and hurled it through the main observation window, shattering the glass that looked down onto the factory floor below. "Hey!" I yelled, staring down at the army of workers and soldiers gathering in the atrium. "Come and get it!" I wanted them to know I was here. I wanted them to bring every gun, every knife, and every man they had. Because the more of them that were up here trying to kill the unkillable man, the fewer of them would be guarding the exit when I burned this place to the ground. The drop from the observation deck was 30 feet, a suicidal jump for anyone else. But for me, it was just a shortcut. Hitting the concrete floor of the factory atrium, the impact shattered both my tibias instantly, a sickening crunch that vibrated up to my hips. I collapsed, screaming as the pain blinded me white-hot. But before the echo of my scream faded, the bones were already snapping back into place, knitting together with that familiar, itching heat. Standing up, the tactical team waiting below hesitated, watching a man fall 3 stories and just stand up. They were professionals, trained killers, but they weren't trained for this. "Open fire!" the commander screamed, his voice cracking with fear. The air turned into a storm of lead. 5.56 rounds from assault rifles tore into me, ripping through the tactical vest, punching holes in my chest, my arms, my legs. It felt like being hit by 1,000 hammers at once, pushing me backward, step by step. Walking through the hail of bullets was like walking through a hurricane, every step a battle against physics and pain. Blood soaked my clothes, dripping onto the floor in a steady stream. But the wounds were closing as fast as they opened. I grabbed the barrel of the nearest rifle, the metal searing hot against my palm, and yanked it from the soldier's grip. I didn't shoot him. I hit him with the stock of the gun, a heavy, dull thud that sent him flying across the room. "Is that all you got?" I roared, spitting blood onto the polished floor. The psychological warfare was working. They were reloading, their hands shaking, their eyes wide with the realization that they were fighting a ghost. I wasn't just defeating them, I was breaking their minds. They backed away, forming a circle, unsure if they should shoot or run. But I didn't have time to fight an army. I needed to end this. Scanning the room, past the terrified guards and the flashing red lights, I saw it. The main pressure valves for the chemical synthesis tanks. Massive yellow pipes running along the south wall, labeled highly flammable. Breaking into a run, I ignored the fresh wave of gunfire that stitched a line across my back. A shotgun blast hit my shoulder, spinning me around, but I used the momentum to throw myself behind a heavy steel pillar. Leaning there for a second, catching my breath, I could feel the bullet slugs being pushed out of my skin, clinking onto the floor like loose change. The energy drain was getting worse, my vision swimming with gray spots. I was healing, yes, but I was starving to death in real time. I had maybe 5 minutes of fight left in me before my body just shut down from exhaustion. "Cover me," I whispered to nobody, gripping the stolen rifle tight. Peeking around the pillar, the path to the valves was clear for a split second. I didn't need to survive the explosion. I just needed to be the one who lit the match. Launching myself from cover, I sprinted toward the yellow pipes, finger tightening on the trigger, ready to blow this whole nightmare sky high. The distance to the yellow pipes was only 50 feet, but it felt like running a marathon through a minefield. Bullets sparked off the metal floor around my boots, stinging my legs like angry hornets. A round caught me in the side, spinning me around, but the momentum just pushed me closer to the wall. Crashing into the pipes, I didn't stop to check the wound. I knew it was closing, even if the hunger in my gut was screaming that the tank was empty. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer caloric deficit of rebuilding my own torso 3 times in 10 minutes. Gripping the cold steel of the pressure wheel, I tried to turn it, to release the gas, but it was rusted shut. "Turn, damn you!" I grunted, veins popping in my neck as I put every ounce of supernatural strength I had left into the metal. With a screech of protesting iron, the valve gave way. A jet of pressurized gas exploded outward, a white cloud that smelled like rotten eggs and death. It filled the air instantly, burning my eyes, making the soldiers back off, coughing and choking. I fell to my knees, the gas stinging my throat, but my lungs were already adapting, filtering out the poison as fast as I inhaled it. The alarm was deafening now, a constant wailing scream that matched the ringing in my ears. The room was spinning. The regeneration was failing. I looked down at my hand, and the cut on my knuckle wasn't healing instantly anymore. It was just bleeding. I was mortal again. I had pushed the biological engine too far, and now it was stalling. "Just 1 more minute," I whispered to my own body, forcing myself to stand up using the pipe for support. "Just hold it together for 1 more minute." Through the white fog of the gas, a shadow emerged. It wasn't a soldier. It was the man in the suit, the director, the one who had ordered the harvest. He walked through the chemical haze wearing a full-face gas mask that made him look like a giant insect, holding a heavy pistol leveled at my chest. "You are an expensive piece of property to damage," he said, his voice distorted and metallic through the mask. "Turn off the valve. If you fire that weapon in here, the gas ignites. We all die." He stepped closer, confident, thinking the threat of mutual destruction would make me pause. He didn't understand. He thought I was trying to survive. He didn't realize that I had already accepted the cost of this ticket. I wasn't trying to escape the room. I was trying to clear the board. I raised the rifle, not aiming at him, but aiming at the metal grating above his head where a loose electrical cable was dangling, sparking with live voltage. "I'm not property," I said, blood coating my teeth. "I'm the expiration date." The pistol in the director's hand was steady, a black steel eye staring directly at my heart. But my own aim was higher, locked onto the frayed electrical cable swinging 10 feet above his head. The gas was thick now, a choking white fog that tasted like copper and sulfur, burning the inside of my nose and throat with every shallow breath. My body was failing. The supernatural engine that had kept me alive for the last 12 hours finally running out of fuel, leaving me trembling and mortal on the cold factory floor. "Put the rifle down," the director commanded, his voice muffled by the gas mask, but still dripping with that arrogant corporate authority. "We can rebuild you, we can feed you, or you can die here, permanently." The edges of my vision were turning gray, tunneling in, the lack of oxygen and the loss of blood conspiring to shut the lights out for good. My finger tightened on the trigger, the metal feeling slippery with my own sweat. I wasn't doing this to be a hero. Heroes get medals and parades. I was doing this because I was tired. Tired of running. Tired of the hunger. Tired of being a lab rat in a maze built by men who thought they were gods. I don't want to be rebuilt, I rasped, the words tearing at my raw throat. I want to be finished. I didn't wait for his permission. I squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against my bruised shoulder, a single .556 round tearing through the smoky air. It missed the director completely, just as I intended, and struck the junction box holding the loose cable. Sparks showered down like golden rain, hot and bright, falling directly into the swirling cloud of flammable gas leaking from the valves. Time seemed to stop, stretching that single second into an hour. I saw the director's eyes widen behind his mask, a sudden terrifying realization that he had miscalculated everything. The spark kissed the gas, and the air didn't just burn, it detonated. The world turned white, a blinding, absolute white that erased the walls, the floor, and the man in the suit. There was no pain at first, just a sensation of weightlessness as the pressure wave hit me like a freight train, lifting me off my feet and throwing me backward into the oblivion. The sound came later, a roar so loud it wasn't a noise anymore. It was a physical vibration that shattered my eardrums and pulverized the concrete pillars holding up the ceiling. The roof came down, the floor gave way, and then there was nothing. Darkness, heavy, suffocating darkness. There was no sound, no light, no pain, just the void. Is this it? Is this the real end? I floated in the black for what felt like 10 years, or maybe 10 seconds. It was peaceful. No gunshots, no sirens, no hunger. Just the quiet. Then came the itch, that damned familiar itch deep inside the marrow of my bones. It started in my chest, a burning heat that spread outward like lava flowing through veins of stone. My eyes snapped open, but I couldn't see anything. I was buried. The weight was crushing. Thousands of pounds of reinforced concrete and twisted steel pressing down on top of me, pinning my arms, flattening my legs. I tried to scream, but my mouth was filled with dust and grit. The pain returned all at once, a symphony of agony as my body realized it was broken in 100 places. My ribs were powder. My spine was snapped. My lungs were collapsed. But the Phoenix pill didn't care about pain. It only cared about survival. I could feel it happening in the dark. My ribcage expanded against the rubble, bones knitting together with violent force, pushing the heavy slab of concrete off my chest just an inch, just enough to draw a breath. The air was hot, smelling of smoke and melted plastic, but it was oxygen. I breathed it in, coughing out the dust, feeling the raw power flooding back into my system. The explosion had killed me, burned me, crushed me, and yet here I was, rebooting like a computer that refused to crash. I pushed. I planted my hands against the rough stone above me and pushed, my muscles screaming, fibers tearing and rebuilding instantly to handle the load. The rubble groaned, shifting, grinding. A beam of light, thin and gray, cut through the darkness above. Sunlight. It was morning. I clawed my way up, digging through the ruins of Sector 4. My hands were raw, bleeding, then healing, then bleeding again as I moved jagged pieces of rebar and glass. Pushing aside a massive piece of ventilation duct, I finally broke the surface. The scene was apocalyptic. The factory was gone. In its place was a crater of smoking ruin, a twisted skeleton of steel reaching up toward the gray sky. Fires were still burning in pockets, orange flickers against the ash. Climbing out of the hole, I stumbled onto what used to be the parking lot. My clothes were gone, burned away in the blast, leaving me standing there covered in soot and dust, a statue made of ash. In the distance, I could hear them, the sirens, fire trucks, police cars, ambulances. They were coming to put out the fire, to look for survivors. They wouldn't find any, except me. Walking away from the wreckage, I didn't run this time. I walked slowly toward the chain-link fence at the edge of the perimeter, the metal warped and melted from the heat. I climbed through a gap, stepping onto the wet grass of the field beyond. My body felt strange, light, hollow. The hunger was there, a dull ache in my stomach, but it felt manageable now. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The syndicate was dead. The lab was gone. The records, the samples, the scientists, all erased in a ball of fire. I was the last sample, the only evidence left, a ghost story that would haunt the police reports for years. Suspect deceased in explosion, they would write. Case closed. I walked for miles, sticking to the woods, following the train tracks north. By the time I found a gas station bathroom to wash the ash off my face, the sun was high in the sky. Looking in the cracked mirror, the face staring back wasn't the same one that had started this shift 24 hours ago. There were no scars, no lines, no bruises. It was a perfect face, a mask. I stole some clothes from a donation bin behind the station, a flannel shirt, oversized jeans, a pair of worn-out boots. They didn't fit right, but they were warm. Sitting on a bench outside, watching the cars rush by on Interstate 90, I reached into my pocket. It was empty. The pill bottle was gone, lost in the alleyway where this whole nightmare started. I didn't need it anymore. The magic was already in the blood. I can't go back to my old life. The paramedic who worked the night shift is dead, buried under tons of concrete in Sector 4. My apartment, my friends, my name, they belong to a ghost now. The sky was turning dark again, rain clouds gathering on the horizon. I stood up, feeling the strength in my legs, the endless, terrifying energy humming under my skin. I have a gift, or a curse, depending on how you look at it. I can walk through fire. I can take the bullets meant for someone else. I can be the shield that never breaks. There are other wolves in this world, other monsters hiding in the dark, hurting people who can't fight back. And now, there is something hunting them. I pulled the collar of the jacket up against the wind and started walking north, vanishing into the gray mist of the highway. My name is Jonathan. I used to save lives for a paycheck. Now, I have all the time in the world, and I'm just getting started.